When the pressure is high and the energy low, that's when your business needs inspiration to change and to grow. It's also when true captains show up. Hi, I'm Mark Francis, and I'm the host of this podcast that invites industry leaders from all over the world to answer the question, who's your captain? When you need to motivate and to mobilize, to develop and enable your team. Whether you are new to being a leader or you aspire to be a captain, this podcast is for you. Welcome everybody to Who's Your Captain. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Paul Munnelly, the CEO of Munnelly Group. Paul, welcome.
Thank you. Good to speak and good to be here. So I appreciate the reach out.
Now, the central question we're going to answer together today is, in a family business, how do you take over and maintain excellence when you're the new kid on the block? So that's the theme. That's the main question. And we're a year in. You started as CEO, April 2025.
Yes.
So we're just about coming up to the annual review, if we can call this podcast that. So I've got to ask first question. What are you most proud of as the CEO of a brilliant, growing business in the construction industry?
I think in the short term, what I have been most proud of is how everyone has been very encouraged and receptive to change. There has been change that's certainly happened in the last 12 months and slightly longer than that, but certainly in the immediate term. And you know, sometimes that can be difficult. Change is, people are creatures of comfort, and they like the routine. They like things that they do every single day and the similarities of those. But when I came into the role, for me, it wasn't necessarily business as usual. I did want to do things differently, and rightly so. And the way that people have engaged with that change and been receptive to that, bearing in mind that, we have people that have been with us, 20, 30, even 40 years. So, everyone has been really encouraged by it. And the reason I think they've been encouraged by it is because they can see why it is important to do that. They can see what the goal is. So when change does come, and inevitably, and transformation, understanding, what the end goal is key for that. So people understand, why we're doing it. So I'd say that's what I've been most proud of. And I guess that's more of a cultural thing.
And we'll talk more about that, Paul, because Munnelly's is a fantastic business. 43 years old, very successful by any criteria, and beautifully in growth. And just give us a flavor about the business, because my take from the outside in is that you're an enabler of major construction projects using technology, using brilliant supply chain, managing the whole thing. And then, for example, for listeners, Terminal 2 at Heathrow, major works for you, London Olympics, Athletes Village. I mean, these are really cool major projects, the redevelopment at Lord's Cricket Ground. So a major player in the construction industry. Tell us a little bit more about your business.
Well, if I was to describe it to anyone who doesn't necessarily know the industry or certainly know what we do, I would say that if I was to compare it to, I guess, a human body, the heart that pumps the blood around the body, in order for a construction site to be productive, to keep on moving, to be efficient, it constantly needs a flow. And through our operation and through our activity, we enable that and we allow that. Our services are vast, right? And it could be anything from the technology side to the people side and the consultancy element to that of being a specialist contractor. But also, it's not necessarily during a live project, because a lot of these projects that you've just mentioned have been years in the making, and a lot goes into that to deliver the best results at the time of the build. So we get involved really early, but then often we're the last ones there during handover to a live asset, whether that's a building or a piece of track or road or bridge or anything. And yeah, our responsibility, as you say, is to keep things moving, keep a project efficient, keep it productive, and that's where we step in.
And this is everything, isn't it? This is about sourcing people to be the laborers on the project. It's about technology support. It's the full support package for a major construction project. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it would support services very much sort of within the service industry. But yeah, you're 100% correct. The world has changed, and we see ourselves as a delivery partner that we can partner those developers or those tier ones to deliver these projects, and for them to come to us for expertise in an array of different things. But yeah, as I said, it could be boots on the ground. It could be people in the back office, people in control rooms, but it could also be technology. It could be very much the planned element of it, all right through to the management of a live asset. It's quite vast and has certainly grown that way, which is really, really good place to be in.
And a lovely, you took over a successful business, strong foundation, multi-million pound business, and you've grown it significantly, even if just by revenue criteria. Really good. What's new? What have you brought on? What's your stamp on the business?
I think there's been a cultural shift. I really do. And it's not obviously evident from being outside of our business. And it's not evident from our shop window, as it were. But there's been a huge cultural change within the business. We are a people business, and it's people that are going to deliver excellence. So there has been a cultural shift in the way people deliver that, the way people perform, the way people engage, the way people collaborate. Our three core values are trust, innovation, and collaboration, with collaboration being a capital C. In order for all the businesses to be successful, because we have 8 within our group, they have to collaborate. We have to all work together. And it's similar to a project. You'll have lots of companies, lots of contractors, lots of people on a project, but everyone has to work to deliver that end product, that end goal. And that has been the biggest shift. We've moved offices, obviously, from the place of our birth in Harrow to Kings Langley, and there's been lots of other things we've been working on in regards to sort of AI and technology. We've launched new businesses and products and acquired some great businesses and some talent. But for me, the cultural shift has been the change. And I think that's really important, not just for us, but for the industry, because the industry needs to culturally change. There aren't people going into construction like there used to be, so we need to make it an attractive proposition. Otherwise, we will have a aging workforce, aging population, and the pool of people that we're all working with and for, we can maintain that talent and attract talent.
What did you do specifically? Because when we first spoke about this, I asked the question, so how did you enhance the culture? And there are real specifics that you brought to the business. What are those specifics that helped engender an even better culture?
We took it back to basics, right? So really understanding what our values are. And those values weren't necessarily determined by the leadership. Those values were surveyed by our entire workforce, everyone. We found the common themes and the common trends of those. So we assured that, right, those are our real simple values. We then bred a culture that everything we do can tie back to those values. So whenever we do any project or any initiative or anything, right, there's usually an action plan around it and a working group, but the outcomes and then in order to get to that point, we had to ensure that every action could be tied back to trust, collaboration, innovation. We then set our mission and vision and re-looked at that, understanding what that was. And then we kind of looked further afield to 2030. And, that was, I guess, our 5-year plan to understand what we wanted to be and what we wanted to look like. in 5 years' time, and we call it Target 2030. So that became our North Star, as it were. And if we understood, right, where do we want to be by 2030, we then we created the path in order to be at that place. And it's a whole
so
bunch of things in regards
and
to
do I
that
feel
process.
do I feel it? So if I'm anyone in your team, and I go to a workshop in any nature, it could be about project planning, but it could also be training, because you invest a lot in training your team as well. Are those behaviors connected to values always front and center? Is that the idea?
I mean, certainly that's the idea. If you were to ask me, can you feel it? I'd probably be incredibly biased, right? And say yes.
Definitely,
The
yes.
people to speak to would be our people. And you would hope that that is the case. I am confident, and once again, I'm speaking from a position of, being biased in that sense. I am confident that everyone, for the most part, would say they feel it and they understand it and they get it, and that is the makeup of who we are. I
That's
think
cool.
we've got our own metrics as to how we measure that, i.e., what are people saying about us? What are our people saying about us? People that join us, people that leave us, why, understanding why that is, and addressing those. So based on those metrics, I'd be fairly confident to say that people do feel that.
That's great. And what is that vision? What is the 2030 vision then? Because great leaders for me not only have the vision, but they articulate it. Tell me what it is.
I mean, we have certainly the commercial element of that. We have as in the financial, where we want to be financially. We have the markets we want to be in as well, which I'm probably not going to reveal here.
More than you've got now. So a broadening, a growing of the business into different countries.
Different markets, different countries.
Fascinating.
Very much so. We have an idea of what that looks like. But I guess what I can reveal about Target 2030 is we've done a really good job of diversifying what we do. So the people that we work with, people that we work for, the markets that we tend to operate in, the types of work we do. 10, 20 years ago, we'd very much be within the vertical built environment, probably working within the private sector. Now we very much work within the public sector. We work in infrastructure. We are doing work overseas, very much earlier in the conversation, late in the conversation. So that's helped us with the market volatility, which naturally the UK is having and has been having for the last couple of years. I feel that if we weren't diversified and we worked predominantly within a certain sector for a certain part, we'd be susceptible to the volatilities of the economy, of the market. So by diversification, very much doing the type of work we're used to, but diversifying that. Doing
what does that look like, Paul? What? Give me an example of this. We're doing something very different, diversifying. Give me an example.
So we see huge amount of growth in, let's say, energy sector, right?
Huge.
We are doing the likes of access control and the people delivery side of it, logistics, planning, certainly within buildings, within MOD, within MOJ and such. But energy is very much a growth sector that actually what we do in the areas we work in is very much transferable to energy. I also feel that water's going to be the most important, I believe, commodity to people, to this country. And I see a huge amount of investment and growth in that. So very much looking at the types of activity that we do within a residential vertical building, applying it to any transformation within the water sector or any structural changes or buildings within the energy side.
So this is opening the mind, actually. I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone who's in your team, working for Munnelly's, and you're asking me to think bigger, think broader, think outside the box, classic stuff. How do you mobilize that? How do you get your team to get behind the the new way, the broader thinking, the different markets? How do you mobilize your team?
I think it's important to evidence where we've been successful with it in the past. And we're not always going to get it right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right. So in the past, we have gone into areas which are probably slightly outside our comfort zone, very much in the stretch zone. And it may not have worked as we'd like it to, but being confident to say, well, actually, that hasn't worked. So let's just stop that and let's pivot and move. Right. So when it's a case of, I guess, leading people into those new frontiers, as it were, it's important to show evidence where we've been successful in the past by doing it. But equally, it's important to say, look, this may or may not work, and that's okay, but we're going to try it. It's not being afraid to fail. And obviously, you measure risk, right? We're not going to do anything completely alien to us as a business because that just doesn't make sense. But where there are parallels and it does make sense, it's about bringing people on the journey as to why we want to do that. So we're very big on communication, giving people the understanding, the backstory as to the why, as opposed to the what. And I think that massively helps when you go on those, I guess, new frontiers.
Well, what I'm loving listening to you, Paul, is that I know that what you say is working, and I know because of outside-in reputation, which is fantastic of your group, but also genuinely, you're in multi-million pound growth. You know, in your first year report, the business was always performing well, and it's jumped again. So this approach is working by a number of different metrics. So congratulations. How do you now develop the team? Because this is exciting to me because I'm listening to a leader in an industry which is relatively conservative in its nature, but I'm listening to an entrepreneurial, open-minded leader, which is exciting. How do you develop your team? What's the development team of your team strategy? How are you doing that?
I think the first thing we needed to do was to become, or certainly encourage the workplace to be an attractive place to work, right? Make it desirable. As I said, we're competing against other industries.
Was that why you moved, by the way? Is that why you went to King's
Yeah,
Lynn from
I think.
North London?
I mean, we loved Harrow. Harrow was, as I said, our birthplace. But we knew it was getting to the point where we had to create a working space, right? Which was different from pre-COVID times. Like there's no denying that, right? How you would come to an office or a working environment pre-COVID is different to the way it is now. You have to incentivize the space. You have to make it a place that people actually want to go to. If people are coming to an office where it's just sitting at their desk and locking into the screen, they might as well just do that in a coffee shop or at home or whatever. So we had to create a space where there was value being brought to those environments. So all our working environments are very much like that. So from a physical element, we had to make the business an attractive place to work. From a cultural perspective, we had to make the business an attractive place to work because we felt that's the best way to attract the best talent in the industry. And there's no denying it. And I say it quite openly, you know, we want to attract the best talent in the industry. I mean, talent is, I guess, leaving the industry or leaving this country, but that's a whole different another story. And the pool of talent is getting smaller. So we have to be more competitive in that space. In regards to once we've attracted that talent and we've got a good info of a talent, it's all about retention, right? And it's ensuring that, you know, once again, we have metrics in place in regards to that retention, ensuring that people want to then stay with us. So not only join us, want to stay with us. Then it's a case of, right, how do we then develop that into what we do? So we do a lot of training, in many, many forms. We're very transparent about what we do, very communicative. We do a lot with young people to almost grow the future leaders of the business, because if we feel if we get it right within the grassroots of those young people coming into our business, as they take on new roles and become future leaders, it's already ingrained. So we do a huge amount in that as well. And then it's all about just, information sharing and constantly evolving, constantly pushing, constantly performing, never stopping really. And but making that in a way that's not doesn't feel heavy or doesn't feel like it's a burden, making sure it's really engaging, it's bite-sized chunks. And yeah, it's digestible learning. That's the way we've kind of developed it, and we'll continue to develop things.
Love to explore that more, because I've
Mm.
worked with a number of different construction companies. And of course, you've got to invest in health and safety, absolutely critical on any construction site. So there are technical training courses that are a must do, frankly, by regulation. Tell me a bit more about I'm going to call them training courses. They're much more than that in terms of what you do, but what are some of the training courses that you do that are not specifically about the technical side of the job, that are more leadership or soft skill developing? Give us some examples.
I mean, it's usually vast, right? So you've got things from cyber securities or manual handling. But then we have things around dealing with difficult situations or accountability. It's very vast, and they form many different. Many different types of training, whereby some it's online, digital, learning, reading, listening, and completing surveys and certifications around that, and others could be working groups, which we do quite extensively. Once we have different phases of that. So let's say leadership, we have leadership training. We also have advanced leadership training. There's a leadership manifesto. So actually people don't see it as a case of, right, I'm just doing this because I have to. It's a case of, right, I'm doing this because I want to. So it's very much evolved from where we were. And this is something which, as I said, we've heavily invested in from a time, effort, money perspective over the last year, or just over a year, 2 years now. And we're seeing the fruits of the labor in that people actually are excited to do the next set of training.
That's brilliant. I'd like to talk about the industry now, because one of the things you are is a thought leader, seen as that within the industry. What would you say is the biggest operational challenge that big projects that you're involved in face right now? Operation, what's the biggest challenge that is consistently rearing its ugly head?
I think it's cost, right? I think it's cost. There's rising costs. There's things outside of our control. Inflation, wars, cost of fuel, which naturally is going to just drive up the cost to the point where it makes projects undeliverable. So once again, that kind of has a knock-on effect in regards to investment and confidence. I think a challenge is the talent element of it, whereby people may be looking to different industries or different regions due to the attractiveness of that. I think that's a major piece as well. I feel that public perception potentially of some major projects is slightly diminished, because people, when it's, I guess, government funded or taxpayers funded, they're thinking, right, well, what is going on here? How is this being spent? Is it being managed? So I guess you could probably wrap all of those things in confidence. So confidence of the people going into the industry and not necessarily going to other territories or other industries, confidence in the public in what we do, and I guess confidence in investment in regards to this country. I'd say that's the main challenges.
Thank you. Yeah, really challenging, right? That's a decent list of challenges. How do you get the message across about the industry, particularly in terms of Munnelly's being a great place to work? Number one, great place to work, but also a great place to develop, given that the perception might be still that, it's a little bit old-fashioned as an industry and very male-dominated usually. How do you get the message out there that Munnelly's is actually different and driving positive change?
I think there's a couple of things, right? So within construction, and we do a lot of speaking at schools, and they perceive if you work in construction, oh, you must be doing trades and things like that. But there's a huge amount of roles within construction, right? You could be working in finance, in tech, developing AI, marketing. So it's to show that there are actually careers in the industry, um, and you can have a long career in this industry. I think another important thing to say is our industry has probably, and don't quote me on this, but I would say it's probably got the most accidental business owners as far as industries go, right? And what I mean by that is if you are a tradesperson or work in an industry, you tend to start doing the work and all of a sudden you start a company, all of a sudden you then engage with technology in regards to invoicing and client base. So then you start getting a fleet of vehicles, a plant, and then you start recruiting. And all of a sudden, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, you are business owner from entrepreneur. And that might not have necessarily been the case at the very beginning. So there's a lot about, right, things can snowball to understand, right, what is the most important things about being a business owner. But also, once again, I feel like I don't know if this is a generational thing or a country thing, but people have a perception that being a business owner is the end game, and it really isn't. You could just be just as successful working for a company. You can get all of the self-rewarding elements of it without having being a business owner is a stressful thing. Are you going to earn just as much money being a business owner or work for a company? I think it's actually probably comparable. So I have given people the confidence that actually you don't have to, being successful isn't being necessarily, I guess, a business owner. You could be super successful in many of the well-standing and great businesses there are, and just taking them that step further. So, yeah, there's a huge amount of opportunity, and we very much within the group want people to be entrepreneurial. We want people to feel like they're business owners without having to have those sleepless nights of, I've got to invoice that client, or I've got to do that cash collection, or I should do this. It's a case of, right, well, the group will take away all of those stresses so that you can focus on what you do best. So anyone coming into a leadership role or any business coming into our group, it's a case of, right, we are going to take away the general day-to-day admin heavy items so that you can concentrate on what you do best. And that's been our mantra, and that's what we encourage.
Yeah, I saw a brilliant short interview with Simon Sinek in terms of what does he think about values? And he said, well, actually, values are behaviors. It's much better to describe them as that. So I quite like this. The simplicity, he's always very good at that. And he talked about innovation. He said he's actually encouraging people, which is exactly what you just said, to find different ways of doing it. Whatever you're doing, let's find an even better way, whether that's more efficient or more appealing to our end users, but find even better ways, and that's innovation. And I love that simplicity. And I get that from you as the leader. How do you translate that to people who might have been with the business a long time, are relatively, and most adults, we're set in our ways, aren't we? We do something the same way we've always done it relatively well, right? How do you pass on that entrepreneurial spirit? Because you can verbalize it, and then it's about getting people to change. What's your method?
I think people are disillusioned in that they feel that innovation is very much releasing a new app or something physical hardware that you can see. But innovation could just be an innovative way to do the day-to-day process in itself, right? It's an efficiency, it's an improvement. The people that have been with us for a longer time, they're there. They would be more experienced in understanding where those opportunities for innovation, for efficiencies, or improvement are. And it's just about unlocking that. It's about creating a safe space that they can do that. You're right, people are set in their ways, but if we can constantly beat the drum and evidence the innovation that we're doing internally with the companies and our departments, then they're more encouraged to get involved in that. We also we have our own yearly award shows, and one of the award categories is around innovation to the point where, right, if you bring something innovative to the table, and as I said, it doesn't have to be like a new app or something, fancy. If you just bring even the simplest thing to the table, there's that recognition there. There's that recognition that actually you will be recognized for that, and be a part of that, but also encouraging people that actually not everything works, and not being afraid of that. Let's try, push the boundaries.
I get that energy from you as well,
Mm.
that you're not going to be criticized for trying something if it fails, because it's learning even though it failed. I think that's a lovely energy. One of the things I love to do, Paul, when I'm interviewing CEOs is go onto ChatGPT and ask this question. It's fascinating, this. What makes this person special? So what makes Paul David Munnelly special? And I'm going to tell you what ChatGPT says, because that's pretty cool. Strategic leadership and vision. And we've heard that from you about how do you enhance the industry and make it more appealing for new entrants. A culture of innovation and change. And it's exactly the conversation we're just having. How do you create that? And a champion of people and talent. So how does that sound?
I don't. Are you making that up now, or because of the
No,
conversation?
that's
or
ChatGPT. That's my point, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? I mean, that's
Yeah,
ChatGPT. But tell me a little bit more about Paul David Munnelly and what makes him special. That's what it says. If you do it now, that's what it would say.
Yeah, that's pretty. I like that, and it's clearly picked up on certainly the messaging we put out there, and I wouldn't necessarily be putting this stuff out there if I didn't believe in it. It's
Yeah, that's what I get.
I'm putting a name to it. I'm putting a face to it. I'm standing by it. Open for criticism, right? So that people can't listen to this and think, no, that's not true. It's about if I believe in it and I'm saying this is what we're doing it. So that's key
That's great.
for me.
Good for you. And I'm going to come back to how I started, which was, how do you help a business that's already successful, a family-run business that's already successful and excellent, actually, get even better when you are the new kid on the block? And that's just an expression that says, in comes the son of the founder. So Phil Munnelly, the founder, highly successful. How do you do that? How do you build on that, being incredibly respectful, rightfully, and also say, we need to change stuff? How did you make that transition for your teams?
I think it's almost, so I'm a Man United fan, right? And I don't think ChatGPT kind of alluded to that.
It didn't.
I'm a Man United fan, and if you've got Sir Alex Ferguson, right, how do you follow that? Yeah.
It's a great analogy. It really is.
Like, how do you follow the person who probably put Manchester United certainly on the world map, the world stage? How do you follow that? And we've had managers since, and I think the actual act that followed Sir Alex Ferguson was probably David Moyes, and he was probably the most like Sir Alex Ferguson, right?
In many ways, great manager.
Great manager, but I just don't think, as I say, replicating will work, right? I don't think, because it's just not going to be the same. So it has to be different. But also the industry's changing, that it's not, going back to the Man United analogy, Sir Alex Ferguson was probably able to do what was it called? The hair dryer treatment.
Yeah. At David Beckham, yeah.
You can't do that anymore, right? So you look at the current managers now, and you have to almost, you feel like you are a team member there, as opposed to the patriarch, the patriarch manager running the whole club, as opposed to being the coach. So we had to do things different. Otherwise, it just simply is not going to work. So very much being respectful on the legacy that has been created and what has been created. But it's a case of, look, we have to do this differently because it's not going to be the same, and it will just be not as good replica version. It has to be different. But B, the industry is changing, the world is changing, people are changing. We have different types of people within our industry than potentially where it was before. So if we don't do this, you kind of said where I actually think if you don't risk things, if you don't push on, you're staying still. And I actually think that's worse. I think if anything, staying still is going backwards. So you have to keep on pushing forward. So it's very much a case of we have to do this Munnelly Group, but we also have to do this industry, and we have to do this UK, because if we don't, we're going to be overtaken by other companies, other industries, other economies. So we have to do this because there is no other choice.
So I'm getting the CEO telling me very clear, you're very clear about what has to happen, both in terms of vision and how, and the how, so the why and the how. I'm getting real clarity. What role does the former CEO play now? What role does your father play in the business? I'm fascinated by that.
So he's chairman of the business, still actively involved. Great asset. He's a part of our Future Leaders Club as well, right? Which is incredible because
Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about that club.
So we have a Future Leaders Club, right? So within our group and within the 8 businesses, there are not necessarily just young people, but people that are in potentially entry-level roles, right? And it's a case of not necessarily being, I guess, forgotten in that sense, right? So coming together with their peers. Often when you come into a role, let's say you're new to it, or if you're young to it, or you're inexperienced to it, it can be a very nervous and lonely
Daunting.
place. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
daunting.
Yeah.
So to actually be in a group with people that are experiencing it and sharing it the same is really important. Now, this goes across all our businesses. So whether you're in finance, in operations, in commercial, in IT, it stretches across, right? So whilst within that particular team, you may be the young person coming in, or the person in that entry level role, we're bringing across the teams that collective together. So then what we do is we do get-togethers, we do sharing experiencing, round tables, mentorship, speaking, encouraging public speaking, all of those skill sets which we know would help from a future leader's perspective. So Phil's involvement in that has been, he's very much been a part of that club so that they can draw on from his experiences and his understanding of it.
I just love that idea. I love it. I love what you described there in lots of different ways, not least that Phil is a kingmaker, a queen and kingmaker of the future, which is a really smart way to use someone of that experience and sharing it. But I'm getting multi-layered as well. So someone who's just starting as high talent can be in there, but so can someone who's been with you for 10 years. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
And what better thing to offer real FaceTime with a person who started this business over 40 years ago. You don't often get that.
No.
Real genuine FaceTime. And from what I see, it's people feel, very much engrossed by that. And they love that ability just to understand, right, what was it like? How did you do it? What were the, because he's seen a lot. He's been through a lot, seen a lot of change. So just to be able to pick the brains of someone, we feel is worth doing more on, and we continue to do that.
From my understanding, what percentage of your staff would be in one of these clubs, one of the leadership clubs?
What percentage, or roughly how many?
Because this is talent, isn't it? This is your future leaders, isn't it? Effectively, and what percentage of your staff would currently be in there?
I'd say I wouldn't necessarily fully know the percentage, but I'd say there's it fluctuates between 15, 25 people at any one time.
Oh yeah.
And people then can jump in and jump out. It's really fluid. And there's, subsectors, whether it was regionalized or sectorized. But it is all our people, as it's not necessarily an industry thing. This is something we've created to encourage that. But yeah, I'd say between about 15 and 25 people.
And that's exciting because I'm a competitive person. If I'm in the business, I'd be, I want to get in there.
Mm.
How could I do that? Do you know what I mean? If I'm not already in there, do I have to fill in a form? Do I have to go on some sort of a test center? How do I get in?
There's a magnitude of ways. There's the traditional ways whereby, career pages or reaching out to people within the business. Or there's more of the creative ways, getting in touch and just almost being super opportunistic in that
Oh, that's
sense.
cool.
Yeah.
That's
But
really cool.
a lot of the people that we have got to join us hasn't necessarily been through the traditional methods. They've got in touch and made a real effort to show that I guess they're hungry and they want to be the best. Then they want to hopefully join a business that can acknowledge and encourage that.
Great message. Great message. I
Mm,
love that because I work with a number of businesses that have something similar, but actually it's more a reward. So you're going on a series of events as a thank you for achieving greatness in your role.
mm,
It's not as much around learning and development. It's more a recognition that it is a learning opportunity. So I love the idea conceptually. I'm going to pivot to a different question now about you as a CEO,
mm,
Paul. How do you prioritize? When we first chatted, you talked about it's coming to the end of your year, so it's all about budgeting and all the
mm.
classic stuff you have to do operationally. But there's so many things on the go, and not least a number of major projects that you're managing externally. How do you manage your time? How do you prioritize as the CEO?
In regards to manage my time, I probably don't, because it's a full-time job and not necessarily within traditional hours. But I love that. I wouldn't change that for the world. I think about it 24/7. I'm um, active in it 24/7. Um, in regards to prioritizing, right? And this is something which is taken a while to get to. I think there's so many things that you want to do, right? And if you acted on everything, you're actually just going to do too much, and you're actually going to get nowhere. Um, I keep a logbook of all the things I want to do, um, and I just let it sit for a little bit, right? Because something which may feel super important at the time, a couple of days later, a week later, 2 weeks later, just isn't important. That would have just been irrelevant, and it would have got nowhere fast. And then the
So you
priority,
write it down
mm,
and then you let it sit there a
yeah,
couple of
yeah.
days and then decide.
Yeah, then decide.
Yeah, I
Then
like that.
decide,
Yeah.
or something would actually encourage that to surface. Um, not simply a case of looking around and thinking, we need to do this or we need to do that. Creating that note, creating that logbook, as I said, and then things start to surface because you think, well, actually, that is actually more of a pressing need, or that makes sense strategically. And I feel like that's the best thing as opposed to being reactive to everything. And I
Yeah.
guess that's
Yeah.
just the nature of the business that we're in. You have a plan, right? And it's all about strategy. You have a plan of how you want to deliver a project, let's say, and then you go right through to delivery. Naturally, there'll be bits where you're going to have to think on your feet and pivot on, but you follow the plan, you follow the strategy. Because the moment you slightly go outside of that, that's when you take on risk and other elements, and things are bound to fall down.
Thank you. I always give feedback when I coach CEOs that say it's 24/7.
Hmm.
I always give them feedback at that point, and it's one of two bits of feedback. You get the positive one. Here would be the negative one. You look exhausted. Please stop doing 24/7,
Hmm.
CEO. You don't. You look fresh and energized, which means it's stimulating to be
Yeah,
that engaged in your business rather than debilitating in any sense. So,
yeah,
so good for you.
and I think that where I loop back to people becoming accidental business owners, they try to do everything. They try to be finance manager. They tried to be the
Mhm.
operations manager. They tried to be the salesman. They tried to be HR. They tried to be health and safety. And, when you're in a startup, yeah, you have to wear lots of hats, right? But there is an opportunity to get rid of those bottlenecks via, partnerships, outsourcing to consultants, or eventually, bringing people in. I've been at the point where I was doing way, way, way too much of the granular. I was being
Mhm.
very microscopic, and in order to be strategic and to be in a leadership role, you have to be telescopic. So you have to sort of elevate out of that, and whether that's about bringing people in or driving efficiencies or automation and those sorts of things. I think that was the key in order to do that. Plus, it's not sustainable otherwise.
No, no,
If you're trying to do everything, it's not sustainable. Not only from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective.
and a people development, right? You
Mm,
don't create entrepreneurs who take ownership of the business. They actually just wait to be told what to do. So
yeah.
I've got one big last question. It's a biggie. Uh, your father created a sensational legacy for the business on which you are building. At the point at which you pass the business on, and it might be to one of your children, what legacy will you leave? What's the mark you will have left on the business at the point at which you're ready to be chairman yourself?
I think um, I think it's going to be a long way away from that. I've got no plan. I
You've
don't
only
know.
just started,
Yeah, I
less
think
than a year.
no, but I guess there is a generational thing where people just want to retire early. I've got no intention of doing that. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is whoever steps into my seat has to be the right person. I'm not wedded to the idea that they have to have the Munnelly name. It has to be the right person to lead the business and for it to be long lasting and survive the ages. And the Munnelly
Hmm.
name is there in order to do that. And then I think the third thing is I'm not hugely my biggest incentivization is, if we talk about what immortality looks like, is that the name carries, or the business that was started by my father can carry on through
Yeah,
the
it's a
ages. That
brand that lasts. The brand
Yeah,
lasts.
that's what immortality looks like. I personally, and legacy looks like, is that is sustainable and lasts, and is known reputationally for doing things properly for the right reasons. I think that is providing that's tagged to it. I think that's what I'm most incentivized. I mean, naturally you get incentivized, by revenue, profit, balance sheet, all of those sorts of things, but to have something that is sustainable for years and years is key. That's the real driver.
Fabulous. What a great way to bring to conclusion this brilliant podcast. Thank you so much. Captain Paul Munnelly, it's been brilliant sharing your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.